The verdict was as shocking as it was swift. 10 years jail and a fine of $25 million. That was the judgment in the Dubai Criminal Court this afternoon against Australian businessman Matthew Joyce. He spent the past 4 years in detention awaiting judgment. The Dubai authorities claim Joyce is guilty of fraud, but his defenders say he's been falsely accused by an Australian developer who blamed him when a business deal involving a company owned by the Emir of Dubai went wrong. Joyce's fellow Australian and co-accused Marcus Lee was today acquitted and is planning to return to Australia. Shortly we'll hear from the Foreign Minister Bob Carr, but first Matt Peacock reports on today's verdict.
For Marcus Lee and his family, after 4 years detention in Dubai, the nightmare is over.
Marcus rang me and his first words to me were, "John, we did it, we did it." And after that he was trembling and emotional, and obviously it's been a very trying day for him.
But for Lee's colleague Matt Joyce, it's the maximum of 10 years jail time with a seemingly impossible fine of $25 million.
I've got to say I'm shell-shocked. I'm actually devastated. I can't imagine how he feels, how his wife Angela feels, his kids, his parents. My heart goes out to them, and all I can say is don't give up hope, Matt. There's some of us here that will fight to the death to get you home and see some justice prevail.
Going to jail anywhere when you're innocent is an awful prospect. Going to jail when you're innocent in a foreign country is, you know, I suppose I can't even imagine it.
4 years ago, Matt Joyce and Marcus Lee were arrested and jailed for 9 months. They've since been under house arrest in Dubai as concern about their plight has mounted at home.
This is their farewell parties. It's not just destroying Matt's life, it's destroying the life of 3 beautiful children, a beautiful wife, an Australian family that deserve justice, and they deserve more. And for 4 years they've been incredibly resilient, but they're suffering.
The Middle East, Dubai, the jewel of the Arab world.
The 2 Australians were caught up in the world's biggest building boom, working for Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum's development company in 2008, when the Dubai ruler planned to transform his tiny emirate into a tourist mecca.
And the Crown Prince has a history of getting what he wants.
Also there to get in on the action was Gold Coast property developer Sahil Abedian and his company Sunland. It was Sunland's accusations that later provided a basis for the Dubai charges.
I believe any single individual that is in any foreign jurisdiction is involved in any kind of business, they should uphold the law of that country.
Sunland teamed up in a joint venture with another Australian company, Prudentia, owned by Angus Reid, to develop a block of the Sheikh's waterfront land. But just before purchase, Sunland paid Prudentia $12 million, leaving Sunland clear to develop the block on its own. When the property market crashed, Dubai authorities arrested Sunland's David Brown over suspicion the $12 million was a bribe. Brown blamed Joyce and Lee, saying Joyce had fraudulently told him Prudentia had a prior stake on the block. That's an accusation Sunland's chairman has stood by.
If I do anything wrong in Dubai, I deserve to be punished as well. If somebody from Dubai come here and does something that is illegal, the judiciary will ultimately be the judge.
What made Dubai authorities suspicious was that half of the $12 million was paid into Matt Joyce's offshore bank account. Joyce later repaid it less what he said he was owed for a previous deal, and an Australian court has dismissed the claims against him made by his accusers. Earlier this year, the Victorian Supreme Court did judge Sunland's accusations, finding that it had paid the money simply to buy out its joint partner, and that the evidence of Brown and Abedian was fanciful, unreliable, inaccurate and not believable. But in today's Dubai findings, the Victorian decision was ignored, Along with Matt Joyce, Prudentia's Angus Reid was also found guilty in absentia.
It certainly doesn't square with my sense of justice. I mean, in essence, this is very complex, but in essence, the key witness who gave a statement to the Dubai authorities on which the Dubai authorities charged and have now come down with a verdict on Matt Joyce, that evidence was actually put to the test in the Victorian Supreme Court last year. That very same witness in the witness box actually swore on oath, having sworn an oath, said that the statement he gave was incorrect. In other words, it was false. It was misleading. Some would even suggest that perhaps he had lied at the time.
In a statement today, Angus Reid said the Australian court findings highlight that this is a gross miscarriage of justice. Matthew Joyce has also released a statement expressing shock that he'd been convicted based on the evidence of a witness found by an Australian court to have lied.
When we first heard the case against Matt, it was utter disbelief that this could be the case. Matt is the most honest and upstanding person that we've met in both a professional and a personal sense, and utter disbelief. And all we could think was, this is a huge mistake, this will all be over quickly.
And together, stand together.
Friends Eleanor Cox and Marcus Gillizo noticed a dramatic change in Matt Joyce even after his earlier imprisonment.
It clearly had an enormous impact on him. You know, he was literally physically smaller, and his hair had greyed, and, you know, Matt was, you know, obviously under incredible pressure and had gone through an experience that would be very hard to comprehend, having actually been put in jail for what I understand was 9 months.
We've got Marcus Lee, who's acquitted, which is sensational, but there's no mention of Matt Joyce being detained.
Already, the Liberal Senator Helen Kroger has called for the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, to intervene.
This is terrible. She needs to get on the phone and direct them to the findings of the Victorian Supreme Court. There will be an appeal process in those representations. She could suggest that the Australian government would assist in coordinating the location of any Australians who could give evidence which would further give advice to this situation.
Matt Joyce will be appealing his sentence, but either way it seems his detention in Dubai is certain to continue for many more years to come.
The thing that saddens me most is the lost childhood that his 3 young children are currently having, and the lost opportunities he's having to fully embrace fatherhood. And Matt is such a fantastic father, and they're such a beautiful family. And these last 4 years have placed such an incredible strain on them. It's that loss of innocence and the loss of family time that is so incredibly sad.
And Australia's Foreign Minister Senator Bob Carr joined me a short while ago from Doha, where he's attending trade talks. Senator Carr, what's your reaction to the verdicts in Dubai, particularly in relation to Matthew Joyce, who's been sentenced to 10 years in prison and a fine of $25 million?
Well, I think we've got to say our thoughts are with the Joyce family after what they've been through. This case has gone on for far too long. It's gone on for 4 years. And we can only imagine the pressure and the stress the family is under after receiving this judgment today. I can say that during any appeal process they will be strongly supported by the Australian Embassy here in the UAE, which has taken a very keen interest in this case for as long as it's gone on. And it's gone on, as I said, for far too long, a point I made to the Foreign Minister of the UAE, Sheikh Abdullah, to whom I was speaking about this only yesterday.
The family considers this a miscarriage of justice. Do you?
We don't make judgments about the content of the legal case. Our job, we can't be a legal aid agency for those 1 million Australians travelling overseas every year. But what we can do is make representations about due process. Our goal should be to see that Australian citizens caught up in the legal systems of other jurisdictions are treated the same as the citizens of those countries, and that's what we've done in this case. I think one thing is beyond contention, and that is that the case has gone along gone on for far too long, and the bulk of our 57 representations from the Governor-General down, including from the Prime Minister as well, the bulk of our representations have been about the length of time it has taken to get to this point.
On your point about due process, the Victorian Supreme Court, which examined these matters, ruled earlier this year that Mr Joyce had done nothing wrong. In those 57 representations, was it pointed out to the government of the United Arab Emirates that an Australian court had made that finding?
Lee, I myself have made that point in my representations. I think in about the middle of last year, I presented to His Highness Sheikh Abdullah that there should be a delay in the reconsideration of this matter by the court in Dubai so that the judge could take into account the matters that came out in the Victorian Supreme Court case. But I must make 2 points about this. First, I guess a judge in Dubai would take account of what was said in the Victorian Supreme Court as much as a crusty, hard-headed judge in Victoria would take account of a decision in the Dubai court. And the second point is this. I'm advised that the court in Victoria, the case in Victoria, did not deal with what is the core issue under consideration here, and that is the receipt by Mr Joyce of a sum of $6 million that he deposited in a Jersey Island bank account. He argues, I should say instantly, that that was payment from a company for work he'd done for them in the past and was expected to do for them in the future. But the prosecution argues that because he was employed by a government land development authority and was involved in this transaction, that money was inappropriately received and deposited by him. Now, we can't make a judgment about that, but the government-owned land development authority, Dubai Waterfront, has argued that as a result of this decision, it lost a total of, I think, $40 million.
What avenues of appeal are available now to Mr Joyce and also to the Australian government to take some action on his behalf?
Well, again, bear in mind that we don't fight cases for people in the courts of other countries. We can't do that. What we can do is talk to the government about due process, but we get the response that this is something for their judicial system and for their independent public prosecutor. We can support the Joyce family with strenuous consular representations, especially about the indefensible amount of time this has taken. But the substance of the case has got to be a matter pursued by their legal representation, and I'm certain they're making a commitment to appeal the decision we've just learned about today.
The Joyce family might perhaps look at the case of when Melinda Taylor was detained in Libya and think that you travelled personally there to try to help lobby for her release. Will you be doing anything similar in regards to Mr Joyce?
Well, I've just done it. I've just spoken here in this conference in Doha to Sheikh Abdullah, who, as I said a moment ago, I spoke to yesterday. I outlined to him the court decision. He wasn't aware of it. And I told him again we were very distressed about the amount of time it has taken, the 4 years it has taken to get to this point.
How about in relation to Marcus Lee, who was acquitted today? Is the Australian government giving him any assistance to get out of Dubai and back home?
We will do that when we have a chance of speaking to him and speaking to his lawyer, who of course is very happy with the result. But his case was a whole lot simpler because there's no implication that he'd received money or made a deposit in any of his bank accounts.
And just finally, what information do you have about the conditions in which Mr Joyce is being held?
Now, they've been detained. Both of them had done, I think, 9 months in prison earlier, but their position since then has been that they're prevented from leaving the country. That is, of course, a severe restriction. They want to get back to Australia. Is
Mr Joyce, though, now that he has been convicted to 10 years in prison, is he still simply under house arrest, or is he actually being held somewhere else now?
I don't know. I'd refer you to his family or to his legal representation, Lee, to give you an account of his circumstances and his response.
Senator Carr, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
One by one, the leaders of Australia